Hey guys, so muscular tissue, right? Muscular, something that makes us move, right? So muscular tissue is very important. Why it's important to us? Because we are heterotroph. That means we can't make our own food, not in a kitchen, but from simple sources. We have to take it. We have to hunt. We have to steal, beg, borrow, right? That's why muscular tissue was very important in the animal evolution, and uh, eventually, like we dealt in the last class, that how the evolution of bone was a big win for animal world, because bones were storehouses of calcium. Calcium is very intimately involved with talk between neurons and between neurons and muscles. So muscular tissue is all about movement. It's all about how fast, how controlled way we move, right? So muscular tissue is of three types. And once again, guys, please remember this. I am repeating it, I guess, several times. The reason is because it's very important for you to realize that these are not wholesome, detailed discussion of individual organs. So, right, when we're dealing with the skeleton system, we'll talk about muscles as well in big depths. When we'll be dealing with circulatory system, we'll talk about cardiac muscles at great lengths, right? So there's a lot in pack, but you need to sort of stay a little bit patient. Okay, so muscular tissue could be of three types: skeletal, then you have cardiac, and the very easy smooth. Now skeletal could also be called as striated. Smooth means that it's unstriated. Now, what does striations mean? So let's look at a skeletal. So a skeletal tissue is like cylindrical. It can be multinucleated. It could have multiple nuclei, and it has bands. What does band mean? So let me try to draw it with this. Yeah. Band means it has zones, dark and light zones. This is what it means. Now, why are these zones? Because of the definite arrangement of actin and myosin filaments. What are actin and myosin filaments? They are threads of proteins, actin and myosin. They're arranged in a very different fashion, and once again we have to deal with that in details, so don't worry. But there are portions where they overlap, right? There are portions where they overlap and where they don't, right? So whenever you have the overlaps, you have the dark bands. Okay, now most of these are voluntary. That means you can control them out of your own wish. So the muscles in your arm, that's skeletal, and they tire very easily. So that's why you run and then you get tired. Whoa, skeletal, not very good at anaerobic respiration. Yeah, cardiac on the other hand is faint striations, and they are cylindrical, but very frequently, or they will appear branched. So you can have some striations here and there, but they're branched. They're usually uninucleate, but some binucleation has also been found. Once again, they are involuntary. Even in your wildest dream, you can't say, "Oh heart, I need to run. Can you do some extra work? Can you pump some more blood right now?" No, it can't. So you can't tell your heart what to do, but that doesn't mean that the brain does not control your heart rates. So when the moment the brain detects that, oh yes, you're running, you have met your crush, you have you're thinking about something really exciting, the heart jumps its race, right? Not on its own, it's guided by the brain. But yes, you can't control your heart out of your own will. Okay, so obviously it's involuntary, and they don't tire. They work as long as you live. They got to work. So you should really be thankful to these cardiac muscles. The last but not the least, smooth muscles. They are sort of they are sort of spindle shaped cells, not exactly like this. They don't have striations, that is why we say they're smooth. They generally make up a lot of internal organs. So once again, and they are involuntary. That means you can't control them. So you can't tell your stomach, oh, stomach, I am about to eat a pizza and I don't want it to add up to my cholesterol, so don't digest it. Simply throw it out. Your stomach will say, no can do, sir, right? So the iris of the eye, the stomach, the airways, the urinary bladder, the blood vessels, all of these things you can't control. Okay, so summarizingly, these are the smooth muscles. They are also sometimes called visceral muscle. Viscera means internal organs, so visceral muscles. Okay, now there's one popular confusion that I want to address here and right now. We often think that skeletal, cardiac, not cardiac, but skeletal and smooth, they are very distinctive. So skeletal is always voluntary, smooth is always involuntary. That's not true. Sometimes you can influence, you have got influences all over your body. For example, somebody, your hands is supposed to be voluntary out of your own wish, but you touch something hot, and even without your consciously thinking, you withdraw your hand. So what's that? That's involuntary control, right? So reflexes, hormones, they in many manners can control skeletal muscles, cardiac and skeletal and smooth muscles, right? So remember, there's always provisions of this control. Okay, short topic, and it would be unjustified to leave it for the next, and that's the last animal tissue, that's nervous tissue. Now, some books, in an old fashioned way, whenever they talk about nervous tissue, they only talk about neurons. Yes, neurons are one of the most important cells of nervous tissue, but those are not the only types. There are glial cells, while neurons are the ones that talk. Talk meaning they carry the information, right? You see, you're hearing right now, you're hearing me right now, and you're passing that information on. Bingo, that's the neurons doing everything, right? It's talking. But glial cells, which are sometimes same amount or even present 1:9 ratio or something in brain, like there are more glial cells in your brain than there are neurons, so they can easily beat neurons in amount sometimes. So what's the function of glial cells? Well, their function is pretty simple. They support the neuron. What do you mean by support? They repair, right? If there's a breakage, they repair that. If there's something that needs to be disposed of, so they are scavengers as well. They will heal the injuries. They also make more CSF. What is CSF? Cerebrospinal fluid. Forget the jargon. We'll talk about them in brain, but it helps the brain being kept fed, and also in a fashion makes sure that your brain is sort of lightweight and stuff. And they increase the speed of conduction to some extent. We'll talk about myelin sheath and how does that happen. Once again, this is and was a very generic description. That is why we are not going into the details of the structure. But what does a neuron look like? So a neuron might look like something like this. So let me draw the spot completely. So what is this? So there's an expanded part that we call as cyton, and there's this part that we call as axon. Now cytons have these little things, we call these hairs as dendrites. Dendrites receive the information from the next neuron or a receptor or an environment, and this is the nucleus. They receive the information, and what happens when the information is received? Something happens here at this point. A voltage change happens, and this voltage change needs to pass on. So the voltage travels. Remember, nothing is physically traveling inside a neuron. The voltage change that happened travels, and this is a signal. This signal causes the release of some biochemicals here. We call them neurotransmitters. Once the neurotransmitters are released between the junction of two neurons, let me draw the neuron number 2 here, and this junction is going to be called as a synapse, right? Don't confuse this with synapses. So neurotransmitters communicate the command to the next neuron, and yay, the next neuron is excited and it's going to follow up the command, right? So there are about 70 or 100 neurotransmitters that we know about, and they work in really weird ways. And as in more we are discovering neuroscience, we are talking about psychology, things are getting real interesting, real complicated. Yeah, so that's mostly it about nervous tissue at this stage. But I want to implore one quiet thing here. Do not for even a second or fraction or whatever think that we understand this a lot. Why? Because let's have a very simple question. What's memory? I mean, you have scientists who would go on to talk lengths on memory, but you ask them, show me how it happens in a cell. And they would be like, well, we don't know, because we don't know. That's the answer. We don't know how memories are stored. We don't know how intelligence is happening from neurons. We know there's synapses are involved. We know neurotransmitters are involved. We know there's something to do with the networks that these neurons are building. But what's the physical basis? What's happening here? We don't know, right? So there's a lot about nervous tissue that we really don't understand. We really don't get. I think it's safe to say at this moment that this is one of the least understood tissue of man, right? Anyways, okay, we also need to address one important thing here, that what's the function of the nervous tissue, right? Although we sort of have a general understanding that, it makes a brain, spinal cord, so it must be to think. So the chief function of your nervous tissue is to communicate, not think. Only you can think. A hydra cannot think a lot, right? Is to communicate information from one part of the body to the other part of the body. Once the information is there, it is the nervous tissue that sort of sits over it. That means thinks, analyzes, and passes on a command. So in one word, it communicates information, it processes information, and it stores information, right? So you can retrieve what was a gift that you got on your last birthday, maybe, or like me, you forget, where did you keep your car keys? So blame your brain or neurons. So that's the chief purpose. You communicate, you process, and you store the information, right? So that's the chief function here, but it's also the most interesting one. Okay, so before I shift, I'd want to sort of summarize what we have been doing so far. So we started with animal tissues because that was a very basic idea before we want to begin human anatomy and physiology. We started with epithelial, we covered connective. Oh, we did miss muscular and nervous. Okay, so this is what we have done so far. So in the next lecture to come, what we are going to do is the next part. That means a few basics of anatomy. What do I mean by basics of anatomy? We mean that what's cavity, what's abdominal cavity, what's serous membrane, what's a mucous membrane, what's what's anterior, posterior, ventral, dorsal, coronal plane, sagittal plane, things that we'll be using on and on in the coming lectures, but we don't really know about them. Okay, so we'll be talking all about that in the next sequence, and once we're done with that, we can start with the organ systems. I hope you find these videos informative. Let me know if you're struggling with the language. We'll try to do something. The reason I'm keeping this English is because it's supposed to cater to not just NEET, but also advanced placement and MCAT exams, MCAT, not MCAT, MCAT. So that's the reason. And I hope everyone around the world is enjoying this. Do remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for doing that. And if you really love this, if you really love reading with me, recommend it to your friends. We can have more people. We can like organize Zoom classes and stuff. So yeah, share. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.